Welcome to NICTITATIng Presents, a genre author series. My guest today, again, is Joe Kaplan. How you doing?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, no problem. We had a little technical difficulties off air, but we got that all straightened out. That was all on my end. But so you have
Technology
an
is so much fun.
yes, I love technology. But you have a new book coming out October 11th from Camcat Publishing called When the Night Bells Ring. Do you want to do a brief little synopsis of that?
Yeah, sure. So this novel is briefly, it's about a haunted mine. A little less briefly, it's about a couple of climate refugees. So near future, think, wildfires and everything that has ravaged the western U.S. So you've got a couple of climate refugees, and they are riding east to try to find water. They stumble on this ghost town in Nevada and decide to go into the abandoned mine thinking that there might be water somewhere flooded down deep in there. And when they get down there, they find the diary of Lavinia Kane, who is a frontierswoman from the 1860s who moved to this town with her family. And as they find themselves trapped in this mine, they read the diary and discover that there was something sinister going on back in the 1860s in this town. People were dying in mysterious ways, and they blamed it on some creature that had come out of the mine. And so, of course, these two women, as they're reading this diary, discover that they are not alone down there.
I read some of it, like a very early draft, and I liked it. So
Nice, thank you.
yeah, no problem. So yeah, I don't write this down. So let's see here. How have the last few years been doing for you? I mean, I think I interviewed you in
You
2020.
know, 2.5 years into a pandemic, I feel like creatively I've been very stymied lately, which is
That's fair.
unfortunate. I think it's being 2.5 years into this pandemic, and I've been really busy lately with the fall semester that I'm teaching right now, and all of that has sort of sapped my creativity. That and that I started two different novels, and I like got halfway through and started waffling between them. So I'm in this like weird space right now with writing, but hey, at least I have this one coming out next month, so that's a nice bright spot.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I can relate to that because I have one mosaic novel that I need to like rewrite and edit, but then I also am maybe a quarter of the way into a new just like novel. So I'm like, I guess I'm doing the mosaic novel for 2023. But yeah, I get it because I'm just like, here's another novel that I could easily do.
Yeah. You know what? I kind of like this one right now. I'm gonna tinker around with this. No, never mind. I'm gonna go back to this one.
Well, it's even more fun because I got
You don't get
one
anything done.
novel that I just have on standby for an agent, so that's completely done without any edits. So I'm
That's that's
yeah,
nice to have though.
yeah. I
Have it ready to
figured
go.
in case anything stupid happens, basically, it's like, well, I got this one. Kind of like a break glass in case of emergency type of thing.
Yeah. I think we all need a break glass in case of emergency novel just sitting there.
It would probably help, yes. Um, so from what I remember from the draft you sent me, this is sort of like a horror western almost.
Yeah, which is not really something I ever thought I'd write because I've never been super into Westerns, but I had an absolute blast writing it.
They can be fun, yeah. I mean, I'm fairly into them, but like I like it when they're mixed with genre. So like,
Hmm.
not really like a John Wayne fan or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a horror Western, I guess you could say, because of the setting and time period that it takes place in, but it doesn't have a lot of those sort of classic Western elements of, gun-toting cowboy type characters. There isn't really a lot of that, especially because it centers on this woman, she's a wife, she's a mother, she's working hard on their land that they have. She doesn't have the kind of gun-toting, guns blazing, whiskey drinking experience, although she does drink whiskey. So it's not your classic Western tropes. I
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
wanted
But
to explore that setting from a slightly different perspective.
yeah, that's true. I mean, there are some westerns that sort of don't get into gunplay, but so much of them are
Oh
just
yeah, for
about
sure.
like guns. So
I mean, don't get me wrong, there are guns here and there. Somebody gets shot, but in the book, but yeah, I tried to come at it from that slightly different perspective of like, what were the women doing at this time? They were having quilting bees and then they were doing all this like toil, all this drudgery of, every little thing that they had to do about, the conveniences we take for granted, obviously. Everything
Yeah,
took
not to mention
so
back
much more
then
work.
they had those crazy dresses, so
Yeah.
you had to like stomp through the mud in heels with like some enormous bouncy dress and try not to get mud and horse shit on it.
Right, right. At one point in my novel, the character Lavinia is just like kind of getting fed up with everything. And she's like, I'm gonna have to start wearing pants.
I know, seriously, I don't know how anyone would do that without. I've been in, I think just the one Western as an extra, but God, once it gets muddy, it's such a pain in the ass.
Oh gosh, yeah, I couldn't even imagine. What
Well,
were
it's
you
just
on?
like, especially in drier climates, it's just like as soon as that's like wet, it's like you're just in a foot of mud. So I don't know how anybody looks cool like that because they don't really get into that in the Western proper, where you're just sort of like my boot's stuck. So you've done a number of short stories as well. I remember we shared the I think we shared the TOC for the Bartlett tribute, right?
Yeah, that was a really fun book. Hymns to Abomination. Hymns of
Yeah, that's right. That
Abomination?
was 2021. Time has no meaning anymore.
I
So,
I know, I've lost all sense of time.
and I saw you were in was it Night Script?
Yeah, I actually just got the contributor copy like 2 days ago, which is really fun. So I love these books too because I feel like they just have that really nice, like weird, haunting vibe. All the stories end up like that. So I really like these ones. I was in the fourth night script, and now this is volume 8. So excited to be back in it again.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, well, I guess as someone who's also a short story writer, I can ask you this. Do you have trouble going back to short stories now that you've done a number of novels, or do you actually enjoy it?
I enjoy it as like a nice break from novel writing. So when I first started writing, and this is way back, I've been writing since I was a kid, just, I always had to be writing a story down here or there. But I feel like I kind of started with novels, weirdly. I know a lot of people start with short stories, but I always wanted to write novels. So, I wrote novels when I was in high school. They were terrible garbage novels, but, they were novels. They were like 60,000 words or so. Um, I don't know how I did it at that time, but anyway, so I feel like I
I
kind of
guess
got
just the exuberance of youth.
exactly where did that go? But I feel like I got into short stories a bit later and really started to appreciate like the craft of short fiction more once I was a little bit older and had a better sense of writing craft and what short stories can really accomplish. Because I always liked getting sucked into a novel and like being in that world. Short stories obviously are much different.
Yeah,
They're sort of bite-sized, but there's so much. You can experiment with short fiction in ways don't that might not work in a novel. So I love it's kind of like a refresher, like a refreshing thing to do to step outside of a novel and go tinker around with some short stories.
yeah. I swear, some of my best short stories have just been I've gotten frustrated with my novel and just been so happy to work on something else, and it's like, excuse me, I'll just bang something out in a week and be like, wow, that was pretty good. I swear it was just me being frustrated with this longer thing over here.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I feel like sometimes I've agonized over short stories for like months and they don't go anywhere. And then I'll just sit down and write one in 2 days and I'm like, why is this one so much better?
Yeah, I never. It's hard to explain to someone that doesn't write as well. It's just like you'll just get one and like there's no reason it should be bad. Like you didn't switch anything up, but you're just like, yeah, it's just not as good. I don't know why.
hmm it's writing is such a strange and fickle thing. I've been uh, writing down my lessons for a fiction writing class that I'm teaching this semester. It's
Yeah.
fully online, so I write out a lot of my lessons rather than, delivering them in person or on
Yeah.
video. And I was trying to explain something like pacing, which is honestly something I've always struggled with, getting that pacing right for a story. But I was like, it's so hard to explain. It's so ambiguous or amorphous. There isn't like an easy step-by-step guide. I mean, unless you want to follow some kind of like really boring story outlining guide. But
Yeah, because I
like
guess
so
if you
much of it that's so yeah, it feels so ambiguous, and I'm like, I'm struggling to explain it, so I'm going to give you some analogies and then look at some examples, and that's like the closest I can come. Um, but
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I guess like a I don't know. I don't even know if this holds up, but it's sort of like the speed at which people speak and interact.
Hmm.
You could almost think of it as an analogy where it's like if you get someone who's like a mile a minute and like never takes a breath, that can be like
Yeah.
you're just like this is a lot. Whereas alternately, you can also get someone who talks like incredibly slowly with enormous pauses, and you can be like, this is too slow.
Get to the point. Yeah.
Right. So, but
It
it's
was. It
even
was.
more ambiguous than that because
Yeah.
it's more like then you also have to account for who those people are and like how they look
Right.
and like just all this other. Yeah, it's hard to
Yeah.
pin down.
Deliberately slow burn story is going to be paced completely differently than like a high octane thriller. So it was actually it's fun and interesting trying to articulate these things that I might not otherwise actually articulate for myself. Like I know what I want to get out of, improving the pacing of my novel, which is always something I'm trying to do.
Yeah,
But articulating like what it is actually really helpful for me. So even though I'm teaching them about this, I'm also kind of helping myself by finding ways to explain it. Like you said, the breath thing, I was like, you have to let out a breath before you can take another one. So that's where, you have your dramatic event, and then you have to have the periods of calm. You have to release the breath before you can take the next one.
I know that was a big learning point for me when I did my first Trunks novel. Was I was like, I just didn't know any better, so I wrote like mostly crash notes for like 200 pages, and like by 50 pages into that, you're like, none of this means anything anymore because all of it is a crash note.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. You need the quieter points because
Well, it's like a
otherwise,
symphony where they just have that
yeah.
guy with the like, just like. But if it's
Yeah.
only that, you're like, I can't hear anything else.
Everything is fortissimo and in your face. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
that's too much. But obviously on the flip side, if it's too slow, that was one thing I heard about my previous novel, It Will Just Be Us. It is intentionally a slow burn, like haunted house novel, but
yeah.
some
I would
people
say
were
it's a
like, "Yeah,
slower
this is
burn.
paced pretty slow." So it just got me thinking more about that sense of movement and how you can have maybe a slow burn that still has those good ups and downs that keep the story momentum going forward.
I know I have the opposite problem where everything I write starts will start at like 1,000 miles an hour. I mean, you blurbed goddamn zombies, so you know how fast that
Yeah.
went. And that was like a
Yeah.
lot of that was I wrote that in 2 months because I just was like, how fast can I write a novel? And 2 months apparently.
Yeah. That's fun. I mean, it's fun talking to you because I do feel like we're at opposite ends of certain things like that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, like, but at the same time, yeah. Now that
So
what I'm
it's funny
writing,
to help is what you're at. We're all working our way towards the middle.
yeah, yeah. But at the same time, so yeah, I had the one experience writing Goddamn Zombie, which is obviously supposed to be like a slasher and faster, so I'm not worried as much.
Yeah.
And then now I'm writing a more slower burn kind of sea monster novel, and it's so much
Ooh.
harder because I'm sort of out of practice.
Hmm. And when you step out and do something that, yeah, like you said, out of practice, that you're not used to or that doesn't come naturally to you, uh, yeah, it's like my last two novels were like in first person.
Yeah,
It Will Just Be Us was in first person, and then when the Night Bells Ring is a dual narrative, so there's sections that are in third, and but the diary section is obviously in first person.
yeah.
And then I found myself writing these new novels in third person, and I was like having such a hard time pinning down the narrative voice. And I was like, is it because I kind of slid into this first person comfort zone where I was used to leaning on the character for the voice? I don't know. So I found myself struggling with that too.
Yeah, what's interesting is actually I had a similar thing because my first trunk novel was entirely first person, and I did find it a little more. It was just easier to like get the length, for instance. But then I noticed like I didn't love my third person, so I made it a point like I'm just gonna write nothing but third person for like a long time until I get more comfortable with it. But now I'm at the opposite end where it's been almost a decade of like mostly third person. So demons, third person, and goddamn zombie chainsaw murderers. That's also third person, and like a lot
Hmm.
of my bigger short stories are either second or third person. And then I'm at this mosaic novel that I wrote the rap in first person, and I realized like this just doesn't work. And I think a lot of it is just being out of practice with first person, especially at like a longer length.
Yeah, because you really have to commit to it at that length.
Well, it
I think it
also,
was,
yeah, it's like the character
yeah.
too. It's like if you have, and I mean, this is a little more complicated because I have a short story collection with stuff already written, and then I'm trying to write the wraparound,
Mm.
and like make that like work. So that's a little harder as well because it's like you're trying to kind of arbitrarily write this thing around these already established novellas or stories that you know were good, and it's obviously harder because you're just writing something from scratch.
Hmm. Yeah, it was kind of fun being able to go back and forth with when the night bells ring because, like I said, I thought of it as a frame story, but it is really kind of dual narrative.
It's a little
The,
both, I'd say.
yeah, it's the near future part with the climate refugees is in third, and then yeah, Lavinia's diaries in first. So it was fun, kind of getting to move back and forth between those really sort of different narrative styles because I
Yeah,
felt like it never got old.
that's fair. I mean, that is definitely of all of the issues I have writing novels. Well, I guess here's a question: what do you do if you hit a wall, or if you're like finding yourself like struggling at a certain point in a novel? Do you tend to like go off and just write a new short story, or do you outline more, or what do you do?
Mm. Actually, both of those potentially. Outlining can help if I'm stuck because I don't really know how I'm getting from point A to point B. And I am a planner, I'm an outliner. I like to have a pretty good sense of where the story's going
Yeah,
up front. But yeah, sometimes I'm just so stuck. I need to do something different. And that may be like coming back to, the issue of narrative voice, right? I just need to write something with a totally different voice, or at least a slightly different voice,
yeah, yeah.
before I can come back to it. Or, like what happened over the last year or two with me, write half of one novel and then set it aside and write half of another novel and then figure out what I'm going to do from there.
I honestly think that's the worst part about, I mean, any form of writing, really. But there's no right answer because, like a lot of
Yeah.
different careers, if you were an engineer, for instance, there is a right answer because the wrong answer, the bridge just falls.
Yeah.
And like a chef, I guess it's sort of. I mean, that's also more like, well, this tastes bad. It needs to taste better,
Yeah. Or you could have Chef Ramsay yelling at you, it's raw.
right? But like, yeah, when you're a writer, there's no right answer, which is really what drives me like nuts because it's just like, and then you try to like make someone else answer it for you. So you talk to your writer friends. You're like, "Hey, I got these two," and you're
Hmm.
like, "Which would you work on?" They're like, "Well, it's up to you." And I'm like, "Just tell me what to do."
Tell me what to do. Yeah.
That's why I kind of wish I had an agent as well. But I don't know how. I mean, I've never had that experience, so I don't even know if that helps.
Um, I guess I guess it can help if you're the kind of person who's sort of like coming to your agent up front and pitching like, here are my ideas. What do you think? Because I actually have I guess you'd call her an agent sibling. We have the same agent, and she had mentioned, I don't even know, like on Twitter or something recently, that that's kind of something that she does with her agent. And I was like, oh, I just sort of panic and hoard my ideas to myself and then throw an idea at her and say, is this okay? Do you like it? And she says, yeah, that's good. And then I panic some more and keep working on it. I feel like I tend to keep things very close to myself, and if I talk about works in progress too much, I can feel I don't know, it like stymies me, it stops me, I get stuck and overwhelmed. So I even like when my husband comes into my office and looks over my shoulder, I'm like, no, I'm closing this out. Do not read this over my shoulder. It makes me crazy.
Yeah, that is pretty funny. We're very different because I get like active, like I can't do a longer project unless I'm kind of like sharing like pages in progress or like talking with other people about, maybe not necessarily publicly because there is sort of that. Like I don't want to talk about it too much in public,
Hmm.
but my thing is more like I don't want people stealing my ideas too. But yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I'm one of those people where it's like I've got like 8 full novels in my head. It just the problem is just the writing it down part.
That is the hard part.
Yeah,
But it is nice to have like a group, of other writers that you can share with and bounce ideas off of. I think that that's nice. I think that's great. I think I just have like a confidence issue where I'm like, I'm going to share this and then I'm going to be like, oh no, wait, this is terrible. I take it back.
I had a real interesting experience. One of the first longer things I did, which was a Bizarro novella. Um, the editor he did this thing I was totally not used to, where he was like, "Okay, like pitch me like 15 ideas, and I'll tell you which one I want you to do."
Oh.
And that was like totally not what I was used to. I was used to people like, "Is it done? Okay, then I'll look at it." But we
Yeah.
happened to be friends because I had hired him freelance for my Trunks novel, so I already sort of knew him. And it sort of just
Hmm.
fell in my lap because I was complaining, I can't sell any stories, I don't know what to do. But it was funny because it would literally be stuff like, a man is a tree, because it's Bizarro. So, and he'd be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
nah, and I'd be like, um, I don't remember. It was just like a lot of one sentence, just like, a house is a person. I don't know. Like, and then we finally left on, I was like, the sky hates a man. He was like, do that one. I was like, all right.
Nice. That's a kind of an interesting process. I mean, if you told me give me 15 ideas, I would be like, "Oh, you're insane. No, I can't do that." I feel like I can, have 2 or 3 ideas that I'm really latching onto and maybe pick between those, but I have to be so into the idea. I don't know if I could just throw. But
I,
then again, I
yeah.
don't really write in the novella length. I think it's a really cool length, but I just haven't. I mean, I'm like either short stories or novels for me. So I guess when I think of a longer work like a novel, I'm like, I got to be really into this idea because even if I am, I might set it aside halfway
Right. Yeah.
through
I mean,
and
that is the
come back
thing
to it
I'm
later.
learning with novels is like, yeah, like some of them, even their ideas I like. And it's just like, oh my God, the Western I wrote like nearly killed me because I was like, oh yeah. So a limited setting of one town. All right. 20 characters. Okay. And then like having to do and like like a western and because like I really was trying to write a western on top of a horror novel, so then it's like,
Mm.
do you just go mostly western and then the horror comes in, do you start with horror and then western comes in, and do you try to merge the two? um I guess I still couldn't tell you what I actively did.
But that's the thing with genre is that it's I mean it's not arbitrary, but it gets blurry and is it a horror with Western elements? Is it a Western with horror elements? Is it a Western horror? Is it the two genres stacked on top of
Oh
each
dude, I
other
remember
in a trench coat?
I
It's
talked to
like,
Joe Lansdale, who blew my mind. I was like, I don't know, because he does a lot of like genre mash stuff,
oh
and
yeah.
I had messaged him, and I was like, yeah, I don't know about. I had this thing, for instance, and I think it's a horror western, and he's just like, just stop worrying what it is. And I was like, but you can't,
Hmm.
right? That's not an issue. That's not a thing. And he's like, no, you just stop, just write it, just write a thing. And I was like, I'm so so used to like, but no, I can't. Like,
Yeah, well, and that's where, the conflict comes in between creativity and marketing,
yeah,
because
yeah.
really the purpose of genre is marketing. You got to be able to place it in the right place in front of the right audience. But totally see what he's saying. At
But
some
no,
point
I
you have
get
to
it from
set
like just
that
a writing
aside. And
perspective. Yeah, like it's
oh yeah,
obviously easier just to not worry about it and just write something.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know, man. Writing sucks.
Brought to you by.
By
Sean
nictitating
Thompson,
books and
Joe
Sean M.
Kaplan,
Thompson.
all the struggles of writing, why it's hard.
Indeed. Yeah, I don't know. Let me
And yet we love it and we do it anyway
and
because we
yet we
can't
do
not.
it anyway, yeah.
We have to.
Have you ever written any? I don't remember if I asked you this last time. Have you ever experimented writing? I know you said you obviously teach, so you've that's sort of a nonfiction like type of class synopsis
Hmm.
type of or syllabus rather. Have you
Yeah.
ever experimented with other types of like forms, like I don't know, screenplays or comic books or any other or poetry, I guess?
Well, okay, so poetry I have, and I've written a couple of well, I've written a number of poems over the years, but a couple of them have been published, so that's fun.
Yeah.
Um, I don't necessarily consider myself a poet, but I do every so often like trying to write poetry. And there's also a poetry unit in my introductory creative writing class that I teach because we have to cover four genres. So we
Ah,
do
okay.
nonfiction, fiction, poetry, and drama, screenplays or stage plays.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of a lot to cover, but the poetry unit is actually really fun. And I always love doing it because a lot of the students think they don't like poetry and then they do it and they're like, oh, wait, this is really cool. Um, so I think it's fun for that. In terms of other genres, though, no, I live in Los Angeles and yet I have never had any interest in writing a
You might be the
screenplay.
only person in LA who hasn't written a
A
script.
weirdo. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I'm a unicorn in LA. No, I'm not interested in writing screenplay. It's just because it's a genre that it's a different kind of skill, I think.
It
And a lot
is.
of people do both, but I just never really learned the fundamentals of it and it feels kind of restrictive and
It is very restricted. I mean, I
I like
started,
narration.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I
I
started
like
in,
narration a lot, but yeah, sorry.
that's all right. Um, yeah, the long stuff I started with in about 2002 were like feature length screenplays. So if
Mm.
anything, I had to do the opposite of what you're used to, which is just like I had to unlearn everything from script writing to become a prose writer because script writing is
Hmm.
like no flowery, no metaphor, no, you just like just the facts. So even something like, she sat in the red chair. Your screenwriting teacher might be like, why does it matter if it's red? Because that's a cost. That's the set designer's job. That's not your job. So he's like, just say she sat in a chair. And then you go to a novel and it's like, oh no, I got to add all that back in.
Yeah, I feel like you've told me before that a lot of your first drafts start out as like mostly dialogue, and that
Oh
makes a
yeah.
lot of sense that that's
I
why
mean,
that would
it's
be.
funny because Goddamn Zombie, that's the first one where I didn't try to like fill it in around it as much. Because like there's a ton of that novel that's literally just like dialogue. And
Hmm.
normally, I would try to like put more prose around that, but since it's supposed to be sort of like a film almost, I didn't care as much.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, cut to now where I'm writing a sea monster thing, and surprise, it's harder because I'm like, I do actually have to put prose in here, don't I?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think coming from like basically a strictly prose background, the idea of screenplays, I'm like, nah, I'll just stick with my overly detailed nonsense.
I
But
mean, I go back and I've written some scripts now, which is sort of like the first person thing all over again, where it's like I used to be better at this, and now I come back to it
yeah.
and I'm like, I'm just doing this stuff that I know I'm not supposed to do, like like bleeds
Hmm.
like a wet flower, and you're just like, well, they'll tell me to cut that, but whatever. um,
Yeah, I guess the only other genre then that I have done nonfiction. I had an academic piece published recently. It was actually bizarrely, I am a professor, and yet this was my first published academic piece, which is kind of funny. Um, it was in The Many Lives of Scary Clowns, an anthology of essays about clowns in horror literature, cinema, etc., real life. I wrote an essay about the 2016 Phantom Clown phenomenon.
that was
Remember
so
that? When they were
weird.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was so weird too, and I was fascinated because it was so weird. And then, I did a little research and found out that like something similar had happened in like 1981, which is also weird. Obviously, kind of different though, because in the landscape of 2016, it's all being shared online. So anyway, I went into a whole bunch of philosophizing on, urban folklore and internet folklore and how all of that kind of gets spread. So it was nice to stretch my academic writing skills.
Yeah, no, I
But
mean that's cool. I mean I've done a lot of like nonfiction. Like for a good 2 years, I wrote for a
mm,
site called Adventures in Poor Taste, just doing like comic book reviews and kind of like silly op-ed things. And it's a very different. Um, well, I guess the goals are different. For one, if you're writing like I guess entertainment nonfiction, for lack of a better term,
hmm
like you want it to be good, but like quality isn't as important as just like consistently having content.
hmm
So it's just like you're sitting down and it's like you crank out a review and you're like, that's terrible, but I have a deadline, so here you go. Like it's just a very different kind of thing. But I have had yeah, I got an essay published in Vestarian. Actually, you were in that issue as well.
Yeah, yeah, that was really funny that we wrote about like kind of basically the same thing, but from different angles, I guess, from different genres.
I was sort of surprised he took it because like I just talk to him sometimes and I just happen to mention like, yeah, I'm writing this nonfiction thing about like a video game. And he was like, "Oh, I'd be interested in that." And I was like, "But really though?" But yeah, he took
Yeah,
it.
so you had that article about what it's just like called PT, I guess, the playable teaser,
Yeah,
the
the playable
creepy
teaser, yeah.
walkthrough. Yeah, and I had seen that, a few years ago on YouTube, and I was like, "Ooh, there's something creepy about this. I want to write a story." So I wrote that, like, I would guess kind of my most experimental story because it's the only story I've ever written where I actually like screw around with the formatting itself in
Yeah.
sort of like House of Leaves-esque way, to mimic like the psychological breakdown of what's going on. But yeah, so my story is this guy, there's this, well, it kind of presents itself as an essay, right? Somebody writing an essay, but it's fiction technically. So I guess there's also that hybrid nature of it. And yeah, the guy writes this essay about uh this cursed video game walkthrough.
Yeah, I guess my
So
essay was
yeah.
getting into it was interesting in that it's supposed to be this scary playable teaser, this scary demo, but then like the behind the scenes was sort of like anxiety provoking because within a week of it coming out, the it got pulled basically because the parent company was like, nope, not letting this happen. And the creator,
Oh.
what happened was Kojima, who did it, he didn't tell Konami he was making it. He just took funds from the other game he was working on at the time that they knew about, created a fake studio, and worked on it that way. So understandably, they were a little pissed when he dropped it because they. And then you get into the whole. I
Oops.
mean, I don't even know if I got into this in the essay, but he's like friends with like the higher ups at Sony, so like they were very clearly like helping him, and I don't
Mm.
think the parent company was thrilled with that part either because they were entirely in the dark when it dropped,
Yeah,
and
I
it
can't
was
imagine
technically
they would
their
have been
money.
happy.
So
Yeah. Oops.
yeah, yeah, but
Yeah, I don't. I mean, it was kind of, so I wrote mine was like, the YouTube video walkthrough
yeah,
of the playable teaser, mainly because I think, I am not a video gamer myself. I'm just really bad at it. I can't navigate a 3D world to save my life, but my husband is really good at video games, so I've like watched him play a lot of games and I really like the horror ones that he's played. They're kind of fun to watch. I watched him play Elden Ring recently
yeah.
and it's just kind of cool.
No, it is. I mean, I'll thoroughly admit I moved to a new city and I was just very isolated. So I just started playing video games because I didn't know what else to do.
hmm
I mean, more as a distraction. I'm not trying to say they help you in any way socially.
No, probably not. But
Not really.
there's a lot of cool games out there now, and cool worlds and graphics, and
Yeah,
they're
I'm
nice
just
to
so
look at.
angry because it's like once a week you get a new rumor they're going to do a new Silent Hill, and it's like it's been like seriously at least 3 years that I can remember where it's almost it's more like maybe once every other week, but like it's enough that you're like, please just announce something or don't. Because it'll always
That's
be like, this
annoying.
one game journalist happened to see a demo and you can never substantiate it. And like the one recently was that there was a rating in Korea for a Silent Hill. I don't remember what the name of it was. It was like Silent Hill short message, maybe. And so it ended up getting this rating in Korea. So these sites were like, well, that probably means there's some sort of demo or new Silent Hill coming out because it's been rated like randomly in
Hmm.
Korea. But it's just it's always this flimsy stuff to go off of. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I do not envy video game people because the best thing about writing is you don't really need a budget.
That is true.
It's
But
like if
that's
you want
also
to
with,
have like a whole city explode, you just write it.
yeah. Yeah, and you don't have to worry about like the constraints of screenwriting too, because if you're writing a screenplay, then you have to think about what kind of budget any kind of studio would have to do that. But yeah, there's that level of freedom with prose writing. You can make whatever happen. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, the flip side is less people are going to actually like take it in. But
Well, that's true.
yeah, I remember, and I do want to start winding down pretty soon, but one
Yeah.
of the best anecdotes I have about screenwriting is George R. R. Martin was in this interview talking about he did some of the 80s Twilight Zone episodes, right? And so he does this
Mm.
sort of like sword and sorcery type thing. And it's like it ends with this joust, and it's like a knight in a suit of armor, and he's on a horse, and he's like, obviously doing the classic like jousting with someone else. So he writes it, and the producers get in touch with him. They're like, "Okay, George, we can afford a suit of armor or a horse, but we can't afford both." So he was like, I don't even remember what he ended up doing, but he's like, "But that's what screenwriting is like." So
Yeah.
suddenly it's like something that would be really obviously in your book or whatever, you just have them joust. But when it has to
Hmm.
be like paid for, then you suddenly have to pick between a horse and a, suit of armor.
Yeah. Or you write a book series that's still unfinished and get a whole bunch of HBO money and get everything made beautifully into a series.
That shit makes me so stressed. I'm not even gonna. I mean, I have a trilogy I'm working on, and like, I need to send that man a thank you note because I'm just like, dude, I will never, ever like try to work my way up before this trilogy is done. I'm just not doing it. Like that's my one impediment. Just like I literally am like I will not go big five even if I can until this stupid trilogy is written because
Get it all done.
I'm not gonna take off on a novel and then have people like, "Whoa, you did a series," and then suddenly it's just like all these people like finish your series and you're like, "No, I don't want to." Yeah.
Right. You can't make me.
It just seems like it's hard enough doing a. I mean, I haven't even started book two yet, but yeah, it's just it's such a
Yeah, getting any kind of like attention, obviously, well, we all want to be successful at what
yeah,
we
yeah.
do, but once there's attention, suddenly there's that pressure. So, yeah, I feel that too. Sounds intimidating.
It does. I mean, I never wanted to be the person that did a trilogy either. I'm so mad at myself. I wrote this novel, Demon, and it just blew up. And then suddenly I was like, well, this isn't done. There's like two other books, like a jackass.
Yeah, well, sometimes it happens like that though. I honestly, I'd always told myself I was never going to write historical fiction because just the idea of trying to get historical details right
Oh yeah.
um, gave me too much anxiety. And then, oops, then I wrote When the Night Bells Ring, and I ended up loving writing the historical portion. Go figure.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of I'm trying to think if I've ever had to really do that. I mean, obviously I do a lot of research in general, but
Hmm.
um like small scale because I've done it with short story stuff. Like I have one set in the '60s, and I had to be researching '60s slang and which songs were popular and et cetera, et cetera. I did it
Hmm.
a little bit in my western because I was like, well, it's supposed to be an old ghost town from 1901, so like, what would be in the buildings and what would people
Right.
be wearing? And then, and then sometimes it's like, oh, well, no one actually wore cowboy hats. Well, that's not great. because it's just, you look at the actual pictures and it's like a bunch of bowler hats and normal suits, and you're like, uh-oh. So then you're like, how much do I keep of reality and how much do I skew reality so
Right.
people think of it more like an actual what they think of when they think of a Western?
Yeah, I think that's a tough line to, how much do I need to have all this detail correct, and where can you allow for some like artistic license? I think that's something that anybody who writes any kind of period or you know, genre, any kind of piece like that, has to figure out where that line is
I swear that's
for
why I've been doing
themselves.
a lot of near future stuff because it's just like it's not here yet, so no one can say it's wrong.
Right. Honestly, I've thought, after doing a historical, I'm like, oh, maybe I should write something that's like in a different world or in the future. And that way I don't have to worry about getting things right.
Well, I'm here to tell you the best is near future because, like, my
Yeah.
collection, I have the novella Screaming Creatures, and I set that in
Hmm.
2030, and it's just far enough away that I can say everyone has a 3D printer, and
Yeah.
you can 3D print a chainsaw, and climate change makes it 120 during the day or whatever.
Yeah.
And like it's close enough that no one has emailed me, for instance, saying this seems wrong.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then the frame story of When the Night Bells Ring is the near future.
That's
So
true. Yeah, that is
that's
true,
close
actually.
enough. And the same thing, oops, climate change means that LA is basically burned down. And, so basically what I'm seeing now, but amped up.
No, I mean that makes sense. Um, well, I don't want to keep you for too long. I know we've already with the technical stuff behind the scenes, we're already working on around an hour or so. But thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it's been a blast chatting.
Yeah, it's always fun. You're welcome back anytime. And one more time, When the Night Bells Ring from Camcat Publishing, and it's out October 11th. So by the time this is up, probably within a week or two of that.
Nice. Yeah, it's coming up.
That's exciting. But yeah, so for NICTITATING Presents, I'm Sean M. Thompson, and keep it locked. Hoping to get some more author interviews later on. I might even try to get some other people from genre, perhaps even an artist or two. So thank you.
Thank you.